Those who are familiar with Nebuchadnezzar's dream know that Daniel was given the interpretation by the Lord. The four metals, along with their body parts, symbolized four kingdoms, beginning with Babylon and ending with the Roman Empire. This is the natural interpretation, but there is a spiritual application too, as we see in the following illustration. As shown, the foundation of the world, consisting of God's wisdom, understanding, counsel, and might, accounts for the four metals and their corresponding body parts. Wisdom and understanding are joined, so too counsel and might. So in our image, we start with wisdom and understanding, or the mind and heart, typified as male and female, agreeing with the Genesis parable and the presentation of Adam and Eve. Since man is head of the woman, then the male is first, followed by the female. Belly and thighs of brass are the areas of reproduction, both male and female, hence sowing and reaping's implied. The mind sows seed to the heart. If the seed from the mind remains in the heart due to passion, a child is conceived, typified by the following. Now Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived, and bore Cain, and said, I have acquired a man from the Lord. Then she bore again, this time his brother Abel. And Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. The word rendered knew is defined by the Strong's Concordance as to know, properly to ascertain by seeing, used in a great variety of senses. According to the Englishman's Concordance, it's found 941 times in the King James Old Testament, used 3 times before Genesis 4:1. These 3 times are quite revealing. For God doth know that in the day you eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. And the eyes of them both were opened, and they knew that they were naked. They sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons. Blame my abstract way of thinking, but when I read knowing good and evil, and knew that they were naked, and bring this to Adam knew Eve his wife, I see the action of sowing and reaping all over the place, not in the outward and literal, but in the inward and spiritual. Is it not true that we must be completely or partially naked in order to have union? And God doth know. That brings naked to the following. For the word of God is living and powerful, and sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even to the division of soul and spirit, and of joints and marrow, and is a discerner of the thoughts and intents of the heart. And there is no creature hidden from his sight, but all things are naked and open to the eyes of him to whom we must give account. Sowing and reaping, outward or inward, doesn't matter. There is no creature hidden from his sight, but all things are naked and open to the eyes of him to whom we must give account. No wonder Paul, when presenting sowing and reaping, stated, do not be deceived. God is not mocked. Following the formation of the woman, and God bringing her to the man, we're told, and the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed. However, once they ate from the tree of knowledge, we're told, then the eyes of both were opened, and they knew that they were naked. They sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths. First, not ashamed, then ashamed. Might this suggest the condemnation we feel once we understand and act in disobedience to the moral essence of God's law? And by the way, I'm inclined to think the fig leaves come from the tree of knowledge, suggesting the idea that we try to cover up our lawlessness by the works of the law. Paul was clear, by the works of the law no human being will be justified in his sight. And again, we hold that one is justified by faith apart from the works of the law. We may seek to cover up our private parts, but God is not mocked. We reap what we sow, even when we seek to put sheep's clothing over our wolfish intents. Finally, we come to the legs and feet of iron, of which there are two, then four, two suggesting the two covenants, while four sums up the foundation of the world in these covenants. And since they apply to the legs and feet, then every person's walk or conduct is accounted for under the umbrella of sowing and reaping. This is why the belly and thighs are brass. Brass symbolizes judgment. It's important to always keep in mind that, though there are essentially two trees in the garden corresponding to the two outcomes of sowing and reaping in the two covenants, they are essentially one in essence. For the new covenant is the placing of God's law in our minds and the writing of it in our hearts. Now we come to the most important point of all regarding Nebuchadnezzar's dream, and that is the fact that at the time of this dream, the kingdom of Judah, or Jews, were captive to the Babylonian Empire. This brings us to the following. So all the generations from Abraham to David are 14 generations, and from David until the carrying away into Babylon are 14 generations, and from the carrying away into Babylon unto Christ, 14 generations. If you're familiar with my other studies, then you know that the three sets of 14 generations comes to 42, which brings us to the following. But do not measure the court outside the temple. Leave that out, for it is given over to the nations, and they will trample the holy city for 42 months. And the beast was given a mouth uttering haughty and blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. Are these two passages referring to the same thing? They are. As we see, Revelation 11:2 speaks of the nations trampling the holy city, that is, God's people, for 42 months. However, in Revelation 13:5, we're told it's the beast. How do we reconcile these two passages? When we recognize the inward nature of the conflict presented. First, the natural, the Jews in bondage to the literal Babylonian Empire. After that, the spiritual, the Jews in bondage to the natural and carnal nature that Nebuchadnezzar's dream symbolizes. The second is actually far more effective than the first. Here's the best way to see this. Do you not know that if you present yourselves to anyone as obedient slaves, you are slaves of the one whom you obey, either of sin, which leads to death, or of obedience, which leads to righteousness? Matthew 1:17, carrying away into Babylon. Note that it's a carrying away. A little study shows that the Jews' captivity was instituted by God, and the same is true for us. Remember, this is sowing and reaping in action. Therefore, the seed must fall into the ground and die. Our captivity in Babylon reflecting this. I will close at this point, but there's certainly more to come. I haven't explained this in as much detail as I could have, but I hope I've shared enough to give you a good understanding. Please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, or even email, and thank you for being a part of Grain of Wheat Publishing.